Yeah, so they've got different bits to what your status is. You know, so if you're a charitable status, you can, you know, you can tick that box. Yeah, there's different options to pick on the VAT forms.
And I think it doesn't it ask you as well, Zoe, like the percentage, like if you're a charitable organisation, like the percentage of your charitable use.
Yeah, so if you use 100%, if your company is 100% charitable, you would put 100%, and then if your village hall uses 75% for charity, you put 75%, and then the 25% is at the.
I mean, the suppliers that we've used have always, we've never dealt with HMRC or whatever. We've dealt with the suppliers. They've always asked us what our figure's made up of, and I've taken out educational things like schools and things out of our income and whatever, and given them figures. That's where our 5%, I understood, has come from. But this puts a slightly different slant on it.
Yeah. So that would be correct. So if your status is, because like if you've got a domestic property within charity, you would be 5%. So, and it's
not. We're not.
Yeah. So if you've got a charity number as well, because usually you put the charity number on, you can go onto a website that's a charity organisation. You can put your charity number in, and it sees, and we can go on that. It's a bit like Company's House. So you can put, like, anybody can go on Company's House and put their company's registration number in, or company charity number in. So yeah, so if you can, like you say, the suppliers that you deal with, if you, like, you can put down you pay 100% at 5% of your bill, so you will get charged 5% for the whole of your invoice.
If that's all charity, if it's all, the information sheet does list out what village halls can class as charitable use, and what other activities are business use. And it is, David, it is actually really, really confusing.
Well, that's why. I mean, I'm reasonably okay with things, but that's why I want to make sure. Fine. That's going to be good. Yeah,
it is as well. That you find some suppliers that if you say you put your village hall 80% at 5%, and then usually you'd think 20% of your bill then will be charged at 20%. Some suppliers just do the whole thing at 5%.
Yes.
That might be why sometimes that might be why, David, you'll see that you'll pay 5% even if some of your village hall is done as a business, is because if most of it's done as the charitable side of it, there's a certain percentage over that some suppliers will just, I think it's just because it's too much for the computer system, they'll just charge the whole thing at 5%. It's very it does get really confusing. It's, you know, it's like, because especially if you've got like I said, 8% at 5% and 20% at 20%. But yeah, like I said, some suppliers will just then charge the whole lot at 5%.
So we'll get the information sheet sent out to everybody after today's. But has anybody else got any questions or anything that they would like to add on VAT? Sorry, Charlotte, I can see that you raised your hand.
That's okay. It's just what Zoe was saying earlier about if you go above a threshold. So if you've got the charity status and then your usage is higher, how does that work? So do you then get charged at the 20%, or is it, providing you've proved you're a charity, you still stick to the 5%?
Yeah, so if you proved you're a charity and filled in the form, you get charged 5% across the whole of the
right, regardless of whether you go over.
Yeah, regardless of whether you go over or not. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
Maureen, I can see you've raised your hand. Are you okay?
Maureen,
did
you want to ask a question?
Yes, dear. I didn't gather what the name was she said to begin with. I just wanted to say that we are classed as a small business and we just pay 5%. I've never heard any of this.
Jenny, your usage might be lower, Maureen. So if your usage is under a certain amount, then you will pay 5%. It's when you go over a certain threshold that you'll get charged 20%.
No, it's just Jenny deals with all that sort of thing. I'm the treasurer, but she deals with the gas companies and so on.
Yeah, so she may have already done the VAT forms for
I'm
you.
sure she will. She has, yes.
Yeah, so that'll be why you're being charged 5%, because if she's done all the forms and input and like sent them to the supplier, then they will have applied it. So you will just charge 5% across the board on all of your invoices.
Oh, incidentally, she rang me and said she's not had the email and she can't get on. So you'll have to excuse her for this moment.
Well, yes, sorry about that. But if, yes, Iona was sending it out again, so it may be in her email box, but it's just unfortunate this has happened today. Going back to what Charlotte said about if it's a charity, it automatically gets the 5%. I think again that breaks down. This is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. That even if it is a charity, it's not the charitable status that makes it automatically 5%, because I know in the case of a charitable village hall, it's still then broken down to what they call business activity and non-business activity. So I'm assuming that would apply to any charity that's got a property and they're being charged for utility bills. So if you are a charity, but you are, say, perhaps doing business activity to boost up your income, so a percentage of your total income may not be for the charitable purpose, then that business activity should be at 20%. So you have to fill in this declaration form to the supplier, but how much is charitable use and how much is business activity. So it's not automatically 5% if you are a charity. And I know in the information sheet it does list what is classed as charity use for a hall and what's classed as business use. So I won't go into all of that at the moment. But as an example, a hall hiring out for private events or for commercial use, then that has to be declared, work out the percentage of your usage is used for, say, private parties or commercial use. That would then be at the 20%. And then the charitable aspects would be the 5%. That's my understanding. But as I say, I think if you read through the information sheet, that will explain that in full.
Before we move on to the next section, has anyone got any further points that they'd like to raise on incorrect VAT or VAT queries, or is everybody happy with the responses given so far?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Perfect. Okay, so the second section we wanted to go over today was meter readings and estimated usages. So across the board, day to day, at Utility Aid, we see inaccuracies with meter readings all the time. Usually they're overestimated rather than underestimated. So it's really, really important, wherever possible, that you take meter readings and make sure they're submitted on a regular basis to avoid this issue. So I didn't know whether you wanted to add examples of when you've seen that personally and why suppliers overestimate invoices and the legalities behind how often they have to take, like what's their duty in terms of taking a meter reading to a customer.
Yeah, so well, I've got one on the opposite scale of underestimating. So I was just talking to Emily actually about this one this morning, and I think she nearly had a small heart attack when I told her what had happened. So the customer had only been with us a few months and they received a bill for £16,500 because they hadn't had all of their bills previously had been estimated to lower usage. So they were being, so the supplier was basically underestimating their usage, and then they ended up with a catch-up bill. So it's quite important to take meter reads for both ways, because if you're being overestimated, you're paying too much out, which of course at the moment in this current climate nobody can be affording to pay out more than what they need to, but it's also the other way that if you end up with a catch-up bill, £16,500 is a lot of money to everybody, you know, nowadays. So this is thing, and the legality for the suppliers to go out is they're only legally allowed to go out once every 2 years to take a meter read. They don't have to come out before that. They're not legally required, but they are legally required to come out, you know, once every 2 years, but nothing before that one. So this is why we say it's quite imperative, basically, to send meter reads out for, you know, so that your bills are up to date and you're paying the, you know, exact amount you're supposed to pay. Yes, Maureen?
We've always done that.
Yeah.
I mean, even when they did used to come and read the meter, we still used to check.
That's perfect.
Good idea.
But we've just actually had, it's not up and running yet, but that's another story. We've had a smart meter fitted. We've had a smart meter on the electricity for a long time, but we've just had one on the gas. So hopefully, you know, everything will be fine from now on. Yeah,
so smart meters, we still, like you're still doing, Maureen, is we still tell people to take meter reads, just so that you know that when you get the bill, that the actual read matches what's on, you know, especially just when it's a brand new smart meter. Yeah, just especially when it's a brand new smart meter, because I've seen them, the smart meters have gone wrong.
I know.
It's technology at the end of the day. So it's 100% perfect, and we've seen it where, you know, the customers have received massive bills, but when they've sent a meter reading, it's wrong. It's just been that it's not been calibrated properly. So it's nice that you're doing that and you're checking your bills, that at least you know then that the smart meter's working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Zoe, sorry, just a question, because for anybody that has been overcharged or know anybody that's been overcharged with estimates, in terms of when we collate that information from the customer, like a meter reading, for example, what is the process from the supplier side in terms of when they are inputting that meter read? Do they go back for like a whole year when they are comparing your actual usage to the estimates that they've previously
so
given?
It's quite high. So if you have been estimated to quite a high usage for quite a long time, and they get a meter reading that's quite considerably lower, they'll credit all the way back and then rebill again. So we've had people who've been credited 10 bills and rebilled another 10 bills. So they get like 20 invoices through. It's just to show that but then there'll be a credit at the bottom. And we can easily, we've gone and asked for that to be refunded back into the customer's bank account. Some customers like it to sit on their account so that then it gets offset month after month on their invoices, so nothing gets taken out of their bank. So it's, but yeah, it'll get credited and rebilled depending on how much of a difference it is in your meter reads. So if there's not a massive difference, it might only get rebilled a couple of months. If it's a big difference, it'll get rebilled, you know, the whole way back. We've had some rebilled 2 years worth of invoices because it's been such a big difference.
That was nice little V payment, wasn't it? For
yeah.
Has anyone got any questions on meter readings or smart meters or anything on that area that they want to discuss, or is everybody happy with what's been said so far?
I'm fine. I take meter readings every month.
Good. Okay, brilliant. So the other thing that I wanted to mention today, because this has been something when I've been on meetings and discussion groups as of late, is something that a lot of people are doing to support their communities in this time. We've had a lot of customers come to us and advise that they're making changes. For example, we've got community pantries that we work with, and they are bringing in additional appliances like fridges and things like that to cater for the needs of the people in the community, for people who cannot at this moment in time afford to refrigerate their own perishable goods in their homes and things like that, as an example. It's really important, if you're considering making any changes to your building or if you're looking at ways in which you can support your community through offering heated spaces and things like that, please check your contracts before you do any big changes on your usage. And the reason I say that is because a number of suppliers will have a clause within their contract where it stipulates how much you can use, and it will give you an overview of either you can use more than the amount on the stipulated on the contract or less. When we were in the throes of COVID, we did see a lot of customers come to us who were impacted by this, as you can probably imagine, with a lot of people using less than what they'd normally use. This is called a take or pay charge, and suppliers will have that in the contract and stipulate that and give you an idea of how much room you have to work with. Some suppliers do not have a take or pay. There are some that don't, but it's just really important if you're looking at making any physical changes to your usage in your building and are trying to do something to support your community, which is great, that you check those details so you don't get penalised for your usage moving or changing over the next couple of months, or especially in the winter period. If you do need help or support with identifying that, please feel free to send a copy of your agreement through to myself or Helena, and I'll be able to check it for you and confirm if that T&C is in there for you, and if it is, how much wiggle room you have to deal with. So yes, please be mindful of that when trying to make changes to support your community. Has anyone got anything they want to add on that subject at all before we move on, or is everybody okay with me going on to the next slide?
Yep. Okay.
Brill. Bear with me just 1 second, because my computer would seem to have frozen. Oh, sorry, Charlotte, I didn't see you just until then.
That's okay. I only just it was just to say thank you, really, because we obviously do support a lot of community pantries through Feeding Derbyshire, so that is really relevant. And we also know that there are pantries and potentially even some of the village halls that might start to operate as warm hubs this winter, and that will mean more usage. So that's something that we really do need to get out there, and might be asking you to have a quick look at those T's and C's, like you said.
No problem. If you need us to look at anything, Charlotte, feel free to send through. I know we are looking at ways in which we can offer our department services for people for certain days of the month as a free service for them to get advice in this current time. So anybody that needs support, just send them through and we're more than happy to take a look.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, Helena.
Yeah. Yes, I reiterate what Charlotte said. That is a really valid point. I was not aware of that at all, Emily. It's warm hubs, and this winter there's a lot of people considering this, opening of space within their community building that will be warm. People can go and spend time there, which is a really, really good idea for communities to start thinking this way. Yeah. So if they have an energy supplier that does have a take or pay charge on it, is it something that can easily be amended, or are they penalised for that if it can be amended? Or
so it depends on the contract and the supplier. So most contracts that we deal with, that we see, that for commercial properties are usually, they are what they are. They're a legally binding contract for a certain period of time. No changes can be made. Some of the contracts in relation to take or pay will specifically state what the percentage difference you can have, basically. So for example, they might say, we'll give you an allowance of 30% to either use under or over the amount we stipulated on the contract. So they'll look at it from your annual usage that's been used. So for example, if you were a hall that was using 16,000 kilowatts of electricity a year, they would give you a 30% wiggle room either side to do that. In those cases where we've got people like community pantries that are looking at how they can support their community, or community spaces that are looking at how they can offer warm spaces, what we could always try and do with our head of net zero services, Rory, is, and with also the help of Zoe and her lovely team, is try to figure out estimate wise how much that would actually give that customer. So how can they still offer those services, but within that wiggle room that's been given by the supplier, so they are not then charged the additional fees. If in terms of charges, again, it depends on the supplier and the contract agreement in place. Some suppliers will charge the customer at the prevailing rate. So if you exceed or go under the amount stipulated on the contract, they will charge you, usually an admin fee, but they will also then charge you for any excess at the prevailing rate at the time. Now, in this current climate that we're in right now, you can imagine that can be quite crippling for a lot of people. So it's really, really important, if you're looking at doing that, that you check your T's and C's and check your contract for that fine print. It's usually in the really, really tiny writing that no one can see at the bottom. So if you need our help and support with that, please do let us know, and we can look at ways in which we can help you. On the flip side to that, it's really important as well to check if you're in a fully fixed contract and you have the availability to do that, because if, for example, in a community, your building has a contract in place where you have the freedom for your usage to change and move, then maybe it's worth having a look at how you offer the services going forward. Maybe there's one building that can offer more in terms of heated spaces and things like that in comparison to another. You could then look at having, you know, maybe more fridges running at a lower consumption figure, and then focus on another building being heated more for a certain period of time, so you can kind of move things around. So if there's anything that people need help and support on with that, do let us know and we can check things out for you and give you advice where needed. I know that we're getting on to 11:15 at the moment, and Zoe is with us until 11 because she's got another meeting that she needs to go on to. Has anyone got any further questions on anything to do with their utility bill specifically that they would like to bring up now, before I know that Zoe needs to head off at 11, before I go on to the next part of the presentation for us to discuss? Maureen, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yes, we've recently had, we've not been using any gas at all. And we've recently had a very low bill for like £1 something. Now I'm assuming that this is because if you use below a certain amount, you don't get charged a standing charge and all that type of thing. Can you shed any light on that?
You know what, I've never heard that, because you always get charged a standing charge no matter what. We've had customers who use a bit like yourself, they've used nothing on their electricity or gas because the building's been closed, but still charged a standing charge. So unless that's something that's in your contract and your terms and conditions on your contract, then personally I've not seen that. I've seen when somebody's not had any usage on a bill, and I mean I've seen people, they literally have landlord supplies that use 1 kilowatt hour a year, and they've always been charged a standing charge. So it might be something that's in your T's and C's within your contract.
I mean, we've got a fixed rate till 2023. I mean, Jenny could possibly, but I've got a feeling that must be in our T's and C's.
Yeah, it might be. I
But
think
you just have a look at your T's and C's. More like Emily says, we're more than happy to go through it if you need any extra help with it.
Yeah.
We'll check.
I bet you want just a bit of reassurance, don't you, sometimes when you see that something, you know, is different to what you've had it before, or different to what everyone else is saying. Sometimes you just want someone to look at it, don't you, just to make sure that everything's, you know, as it should be. So Maureen, please feel free to send over.
During lockdown, where obviously the hall wasn't being used at all, and we ended up not paying. I think they charged us unestimated, and we ended up not paying anything at all for a couple of months.
Wow.
That was last year, year before.
Yeah.
We're all getting mixed up, aren't we? We've lost
But yeah, Maureen, if you want us to take a look at any anomalies or anything you're not sure on like that, as Zoe said, that does sound, it doesn't sound necessarily incorrect, it's just something we haven't seen. So if you want us to take a look at that, please just feel free to send us across any information you have, and we'll be able to check it and give you just some reassurance on that situation for you.
Yeah. Okay, right, fine, thank you.
If you can email that to me, Maureen, if you can email that to me, I can get that across to Emily. And likewise, if anybody has anything that they want checking, if they can do it through me, and I can pass it on to Emily and she can get that sorted within her team, or Zoe looking at it. So that's it's a good way, as you say, for Emily, for utility aid to see something that they've not seen before as well.
True.
And
Yeah.
depending on who that supplier is that that Maureen has, you'll be aware of that in the future if you get that as an issue that's raised. But if you do that, if you want to, Maureen, please do forward it on to me, and then I can make sure that Emily gets that.
Well, I shall check with
With Jenny.
With Jenny, because we don't do anything without each other.
Oh, I like that. That's like me and Zoe.
We do nothing at all without each other.
Always best.
I've got the said bill here. It's wait a minute. It was for the period 9th of July to the 12th of August. Balance from last year we paid, it was only £5.20 the time before. Gas charges £1.78, discounts 12p. That was credit for some reason. Total charges exclusive of VAT £1.66. VAT 8p. And the total charge is £1.74. Now on the
Who are you with, Maureen? Sorry, which supplier are you with at the moment for that?
Gas.
British Gas, did you say?
Both, yeah. Now on the back, it says standing charge, 35 days at 0%.
Oh. I've got a funny feeling you might not pay. Do you on your other bills? Do you have a standing charge? Do you know when it's over a certain amount? Because some contracts do no standing charges contracts. That's the only time I've not seen
standing charge on the electric, and yeah.
It could be then the contract you signed into was a no standing charge contract, so you will never be charged. Sorry, excuse me. You won't never be charged a standing charge throughout your whole contract.
Well, it might be that. So I'll have to have a look on the other bills, but it's never.
That's a good contract actually, because that's very far and few between, isn't it? Now, Emily, they don't do a lot of them anymore. But yeah, like you said, if you don't use any gas in the summer period, you're not going to get a.
Hold on to that, Maureen. Hold on to it. Yeah, Zoe's right. We haven't seen. So when we went through the pandemic, that's when we started to see the no standing charge contracts become a thing of the past, really, because suppliers were in effect losing money and didn't like the fact that they didn't have a safety net to lean on when customers weren't consuming. But if you need us to look at that in more detail, Maureen, just to confirm if it's what Zoe suspects it is, then please feel free to send over with Jenny.
I don't. Oh, what's happening here? Come here. Trying to find one that. Not long since I had the books at the. Our year end, so what's this one? There we go. Oh, that was the £5.20 one. Well, obviously we didn't get it on that one, did we?
Yeah, I think you've signed a no standing charge contract.
Yeah.
She might have, like I say, if she was with us, she would know. But it's, you see, I'm the treasurer, and I just check everything, and if everything's correct, then that's okay. I don't, but I did sort of question this when we got these two very low bills, and I did question it with Jenny, and she was, you know, not quite sure which was which. What's that one? That's electricity. No.
Okay, not to worry, Maureen. If you want to just send a few across, and then Emily can have a close look for you.
Obviously, if that's the reason,
Yeah.
then, you know, we've no need to worry, have we? I mean, obviously we won't get it next time when it's reviewed in 2023.
It's good that you've got that until 2023. Very good. So hold on to that, I would say, and don't make any changes, because that's a good deal. If that's what you've got, that sounds great. Has anyone else got any things that they want to mention before we go on to the next tips? I know, Zoe, when it gets to 11, feel free to you know, to leave in the nicest possible way. I know you've got other meetings to go on to. Has anyone got any other questions they would like to ask Zoe before we move on to the next section? Or is everybody okay? Okay. So the next section that I wanted to focus on, and this part of our chat today should be relatively smooth and quick, because there's not many of us. But if you do have a question whilst I'm talking, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'll stop and answer any questions that you may have. But we have been looking at recently at Utility Aid, ways in which we can support and help people through the current cost of living crisis. And ways in which we can help organisations look at reducing their consumption on site wherever possible. We know that that's harder for people to do at present, especially if they're community buildings that are trying to support people in and around their local area. But I've been speaking to our head of net zero and sustainability, Rory, who has been kind enough to provide me with some tips to share with people of ways in which they can look at reducing their consumption on site, but also becoming greener too. If people are looking at ways in which their hall or building can be more sustainable, greener, and you need any help or support with that, again, please feel free to contact us. We do offer that as a service as well. So if you want some advice in the initial instance, again, please feel free to reach out to us. That is what we're here for. So one of the things that we always talk about and bang on about Utility Aid is creating cultures at charitable organisations. So it's all about creating a culture where everybody's on the same page in your building, who looks after your building, the service users, everybody involved, that they understand the value of the energy being consumed on site and how expensive that is. So it's about getting everybody onto the same page and understanding that we're all in this together, and we all need to look after the consumption on site. So creating a culture is so important. We discussed earlier with Zoe AMRs. AMR stands for automated meter reading. If you haven't got one already, try and get on the list to get one. If you're struggling to get a smart meter, I know Maureen said that she's in the process of having one installed, or has one installed at the moment. If you're struggling to get that done with your supplier, please do let us know, and that's another area where we can support and help you. If you take having a smart meter fitted, it takes away the hassle of you having to go to that horrible cupboard with all the spiders in it and taking a meter reading every month. So if you can, wherever possible, look at that, please do, and we can help you with that. Another thing that I wanted to touch on today is energy firms. I've had a lot of people reach out to me about energy firms and our thoughts for how they're going to continue this year. Are there any more that are going to go bust? I know there was a panorama yesterday about the energy markets and what's going on, and that one of the subjects they covered was how many energy suppliers have gone under. So please, wherever possible, pick an energy supplier that you feel comfortable with. that has been credit checked and is credit vetted. Do not go with any new entrants. There's a big mistake. Please don't do that. Usually at Utility Aid, we credit check all of our suppliers. So again, if you need some advice on a supplier and you're not sure if they're in good financial standing and need some support with that, please feel free to send a question through to Helena, and she can pass it on to myself and we can look into that for you. Usually at Utility Aid, we don't work with people that are new entrants or people that haven't traded on the market for at least 5 years. So do bear that in mind as well. It just shows that they're resilient to any changes in the marketplace. We are expecting later this year in the winter to possibly see, unfortunately, some suppliers go under. And this is mainly due to charges that are due to be paid by the supplier that time of year. And one of those big ones is Renewable Obligations Charge, otherwise known as RO. All suppliers have to pay it. What's happened recently, as we've seen, you probably all remember last year, there was quite a few that went under that we saw, especially domestically. When a supplier goes under, what happens is their charges still need to be paid. So it's then pushed out to the rest of the remaining suppliers on the market to pick up the slack, essentially. So there's been piling pressures on suppliers, and that's why we've seen so many go under, unfortunately. So it's really important to pick one that you trust and that can supply you with your contract. If you go through the process or you hear that your supplier is going under, you will go through a process called SOLAR, which is supplier of last resort, referred to by Ofgem, which is where they will place you with a new provider and you'll automatically be moved. It's really important to note, though, with that whole process, that you still are able to choose who you would like to go with. So if you're not happy with what's being offered to you, you don't have to go with it. You can go with somebody else if you would prefer. Again, if that happens, we will be working with Helena and the team to help people in the background with any issues they may be having with if a supplier goes under. And it's something we have dealt with in the past and continue to deal with. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that point. I feel like I'm rattling on, but if everybody's okay listening to the sound of my lovely voice, then that's great. So the next section we have is being aware of the ghost of energy past. We've touched on this with Zoe about being aware of how your consumption figures can be estimated and how you can be basing your any changes to your building on past usage rather than looking at your current usage. This is essentially what we mean when being aware of the ghost of energy past, and this comes into place when we're looking at community projects. So please be aware of how much your consumption is, what's going on with your contracts, and any changes you can make. Please bear those things in mind first and foremost. Controlling the temperature sounds really obvious, but it's something that we've been doing a lot of recently with customers, been looking at ways in which we can help and support them control the temperature in their building. Perhaps you might have one room that's being used by a dance class, for example, and another room being used for a meeting. If you have building management systems in place, which you can get relatively cheap now, to be honest, we've found a couple for people at relatively low cost. You won't want both rooms at the same temperature. I mean, granted, the dance class won't be doing hot yoga, so I imagine they won't want the temperature really high. So wherever possible, look at controlling your temperature wisely in your building or premises. The other sections that we wanted to touch on and that we're looking at for people on a regular basis is your equipment. I know for a lot of hallmark certifications and things like that, that this is a process and procedure that a lot of people go through with checking equipment and things like that, basic sort of standards. But just make sure that your heating equipment has been serviced by qualified agents, and make sure your radiators are balanced and your air conditions have been tested. We have had quite a few customers recently who have been through the survey procedure with Rory, who's our energy assessor in-house, and we have had situations where systems haven't been working to standard and people have been overcharged because their usage is a lot more than what it should be for the building. Wherever possible, consider having LED in your building, LED lights. They're relatively cheap now because everybody wants them. So they're a lot cheaper than what they ever have been before. They can save money over time, a lot of money over time, and they have a relatively low upfront cost attached to them. So quite a good investment to put in place if you haven't done so already. We've talked about this quite a lot at Utility Aid recently. We are looking to do a piece. You've probably all seen in the news people talking about appliances in the home and the costs attached to different appliances, so what not to use, and things to be aware of. We're looking at doing one that's similar to that, but for office supplies or things that are used more commonly in an office space. So we've been looking at things like printers. There are, believe it or not, printers that are better than others for your energy consumption. And it is something that we will be looking at in more detail over the next coming weeks and releasing some material on. So I will share that with Helena, who will share it with everybody when that comes through. In terms of grants and things that are available for reducing your consumption on site, starting your net zero journey. Sorry, Charlotte, I can see you've just raised your hand. Are you okay?
Yeah, sorry, it was just whilst I remembered, because it was
Sure.
from the last slide. When you were talking about controlling the temperature,
Yeah.
and that there are some sort of useful devices that you can use. What do you actually mean there?
So building management systems usually. So sometimes what we have seen is some charities have had somebody come in and recommend this all singing, all dancing building management system.
Mm-hmm.
The unfortunate thing is with people that sell products, so specific products which we don't, that are attached to these sort of service delivery projects, is that they want their product to work for your building. They don't look at the building and then try and find solutions for that building specifically. So sometimes certain building management systems that have been recommended that are really heftily expensive don't always work for what the people need it to do. So kind of things that I'm talking about really in relative terms are things like Hive, if you've ever heard of that. That was advertised on the telly quite a lot a couple of years ago when it first came out. Other systems that you can find through local development agencies as well are just as good, but they're relatively low cost if you pick the right one for you. If you do have anybody that's looking at that, Charlotte, what I would suggest is contacting myself, because Rory does a lot of work for people who just need some help and support at no charge, and he's got expertise in that area. So if you do have anybody that needs help with that, do let us know. Sorry, Helena.
Yeah, following on from what Charlotte's question there, I know there's a couple of commercial companies names, trade names that I'm aware of, and we have I've sent out information in the past, but they may be a couple of systems that you're referring to as maybe quite expensive. Mm-hmm. But a couple of names that I know of is Heating Save or Heat Save and Tensor. There's a few names I'm floating around. I'm not recommending them, but these are systems that people could look at. But again, I think from what you're saying, Emily, it would be a good idea to go through you, because again, you don't know whether these commercial companies are going to try and sell you a product that's not appropriate for your building.
Yeah, you're completely right, Helena. I think that the main thing with people there's a lot of people that have made really big changes to their buildings and had things like solar installed and or heat pumps, for example. And actually, the best thing to do in the initial stage is have a review of your building done. Have a review, find out what areas of the building need to be looked at first, in a way where somebody's not trying to sell you a product, they're just trying to tell you what's the best order to do things in, what's going to cost you less upfront, what's going to help you specifically, would always be my first point of action, to be honest.
So these systems that I sort of don't know much about, for example, the Heating Save, I think that's sort of controlling each room depending on its usage, and it's a wireless program that people can control remotely to either up a temperature in one room and lower it in another. Again, is that what you're referring to, that might be an expensive option and may not be approvable in that sort of a building?
Yeah, so some are more expensive than others. Some will be fit for purpose for some halls, some won't be. So I think it's really important that people just remember that before they put anything in place, because something that works for one hall won't necessarily work for the other, because they're completely different types of buildings in terms of age, in terms of use, everything in between. David, I noticed that you put your hand up. Sorry, I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask a question if you had one.
I was only make a comment. Ours is only a big hall and feeds off the hall kitchens and whatever. But the thing that we've done, we've got a free app which we picked up, and our hall manager controls the heating. Now that inevitably in the past people have gone to the control box and up the temperatures and whatever. So the app overrides whatever you do manually. So for us, that's been in the last 6 months we've had it. That's been very successful. So
I think that's a really good point, David, and something that I've heard a lot of people mention, because I correct me if I'm wrong as well. Does that, in your experience, stop people from leaving things on as well, because you've got that remote access, so there's no chance of you guys wasting energy, you know?
Well, it is, but it's something that we're continuously on to everybody anyway. I mean, that's very much part and parcel now. We've got a lot of regular users, and they're reliable and quite good. So it actually, from our point of view, it's quite good. It's the parties and things at weekends that are a bit more unreliable. Yeah.
I think as well with what you've said there, David, it takes us back to creating that culture as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Making everybody aware that, you know, it's wasting energy and we can't have that at this moment in time.
I continue to be moan.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to highlight that we've been talking about quite a lot, we've had a lot of people asking us about grants, funding available for if you want to, you know, start your net zero journey, because it can be, as we all know, quite an expensive one. And we all know that we've been given a deadline to achieve these things by, and unfortunately the closer that deadline gets, the more expensive all these products get. So in terms of grants and funding, I am currently working with a number of organisations where I'm trying to get as much as I can in terms of signposting opportunities for customers of people that they can turn to and ask questions to about funding. The main change we have seen over the last 2 years in terms of funding is that you don't really tend to get a lot of national funding anymore. Everything's localized when it comes to becoming greener. We do know that a lot of lottery grants as well are looking at things like your green policy. So if you don't have one in place, you'll need to get one for a lot of funding opportunities now. If there is a specific area that you're looking to have funding for, or you would like some help and guidance on who to potentially turn to about that, please again do feel free to contact myself, and we can look at, you know, signposting you to people that may be of use to you. And the last point I've got here is tell your stakeholders what you're doing to be greener. So we've had quite a few organisations that we've been working with that have made huge changes to make their building greener, which has made in turn more people use their services in a positive way. Sorry, David.
Just to add on to that, one of the things,
sure.
that, although our building is only 3 years old, this year, working with an electrical contractor, we've changed some of our areas from 3-phase to 1-phase. And that has made quite a big difference, much more than I thought it would.
Yeah, is that in terms of your, was that in terms of your metering? Was that the 3-phase?
In fact, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you do that directly with the supplier, I presume, and then
no, it was really done for certain areas to be reduced, so that there's not 3-phase everywhere throughout the building now, because we don't need it. So the electrical contractor has actually changed the cabling effectively rather than the supplier. So we're just using less units. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's another area for everyone. Thank you so much, David, for bringing that up, because that's such a valid point. That's another area to consider, is how you're being charged for what you're using. As David said, sometimes things just aren't appropriate for a whole building, or you can make changes that will reduce the costs. Another area that we've had a lot of people coming to us about recently is metering charges, which they've noticed on their bills. It's not applicable for everybody. It depends on what kind of building you have and what kind of meter you have. Larger community centres and larger halls will have bigger meters than a smaller one, and attached to those larger meters are more charges, and not all of them are actually applicable to every single organisation using them, because nobody's ever looked at it, and it's just according to the grid is the same as it was 10 years ago. So again, if you feel that you've got anything on your invoices that looks weird, or you're not sure of and you don't know what it means, or you don't think it's applicable, again, feel free to use our services and get us to take a look at that, and we can advise you. We do have people internally at Utility Aid that do look at those sort of things every day. Sorry, Helena.
Yeah, I'm just going back to what you talked about with the local funders, Emily. And it's been in my newsletter recently about the deadline for the Derbyshire Environmental Trust, but I just wanted to mention it again. The deadline is coming up the 3rd of October, but it is really focusing this particular year's funding from the Derbyshire Environmental Trust is focusing on environmental impact, carbon reduction and energy efficiency. With a preference not to support projects reliant on fossil fuels where alternatives are an option. So it's almost saying we want applicants from buildings that are trying to become energy efficiency or go for renewables. So I know I've mentioned it in my newsletters. I wanted to reiterate the deadline is coming up. People have got about a month if they did want to submit an application, and that's obviously applicable to Derbyshire. And people may have read it and noted it, but if not, have a look on the Derbyshire Environmental Trust's website. It'll give you a lot more details on that one. So sorry for interrupting. I just thought it was worth reiterating.
No, I think it's great. And anytime you can take any funding to do with your building becoming greener and hitting certain goals that we're all going to be expected to hit by 2050. Seems a bit like it's a bit of a pipe dream at the moment, doesn't it? But yeah. It's really important to take advantage of anything that's offered, because I don't think, you know, I think the cost of doing these sort of projects will increase close to the time of us all needing to be reducing our carbon. The last point, oh, sorry, Maureen. Nearly missed you then.
No, it's just that I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. I've got a dental appointment.
Oh, bless you. Well, don't worry. Well, I'll send all the slides to Helena after today. So if there's anything you need to pick up with us, you can pick up with Helena and she can get in touch with us. But thank you so much, Maureen.
I've just double checked on those things, and we have got 0 standing charge on the gas.
Yes, so you hold on to that.
Yes. I doubt it. 2023, it'll be gone, I'm sure.
Yeah, so you hold on to that one for as long as you possibly can, and then but if you do need us to check anything, just give us a shout, Maureen, and we'll be more than happy to help you. You're welcome. My pleasure. Enjoy the dentist if you can.
So that's having a tooth out.
Oh, dear. That's not enjoyable. Well, good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, Maureen. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
So the last point I wanted to go over before we finish for this morning was just the final points that we've been speaking about today. So looking at ways in which we can manage our usage on site. So as we discussed earlier, and as David's already doing, only heat areas that are being used at the time. Please check your thermostats regularly. Check for drafts if you can, and stop them if possible. Provide meter readings, as we've already discussed today, very, very important, and keep a record if possible. One thing I don't think we did mention earlier is we do have some people that have had issues with meter readings in the past where suppliers have queried the readings. One thing I would say to people is if you've got anything to do with meter readings where your supplier is is questioning the readings, always take a picture if possible and send that to the supplier. Will stop any issues going forwards. If there is a query regarding your usage on site or anything where you believe that your meter is not running correctly, what we usually do at Utility Aid is ask people to take a picture of the meter at the start of the week and at the end of the week, given it 7 days in between. And then we will send that to the supplier so that we can then clearly see if a meter is not consuming properly or if something's amiss there. So if you do have any issues like that, that's one tip I would give you, that suppliers will then push the matter forwards for you. And then deal with your base load. So what we mean by base load is the base of your energy usage. So please, wherever possible, switch off all non-essential equipment every day. I recently found out that a phone charger without a phone charger plugged into it uses the same amount as if it was plugged in. That scared the life out of me, and now I have everything off all the time at home. So please do bear that in mind as well. And that could be something you can do at home also. But other than that, I think that is everything from me today. If you do have anything that you need help and support with, we understand how hard it is for charities and not-for-profits at the moment. We work in it every day. I personally am on a lot of sessions and discussion groups, so I know what the struggles are that people are going through. So if there's any way in which we can help and support you, offer some advice, you know, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll always be happy to help. If you get in touch with us via Helena, it will come straight through to myself and we can support you. But I think that's everything from us today. I just hope that you all found the session helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. I've just checked back through the chat, a question that was that Lee posed on the chat earlier, which I'd not noticed myself, but we'll go back to this. When you get moved to a different supplier, if your supplier has gone under, are you still on the same contract? Or does it, I suppose, you meaning or leave, does it automatically mean that that contract's finished and you've got no
get put on a new contract, or what happens?
What happens?
So unfortunately, in my experience with dealing with the solar process, when a supplier goes under, your contract is no longer in place going forwards. Usually, one thing that I will mention on that note that's really important is that if, for example, you had any credit on the accounts, any money owed to the charity, that will be picked up by the supplier, the new supplier coming in.
Okay.
So the new supplier that takes over after your current one goes into administration or goes under, they are given money by Ofgem to pick up things like customers who are owed credits. Okay. So that will be paid back to you. However, the contract itself will no longer be in place as we avoided. One thing that I would say is it's really important to mention when that happens and that process begins, it is slim pickings for suppliers at the moment. So the last one that was picked purely because they had the capacity to take it. I will say that they did have a 2 on Trustpilot, so that's kind of speaks for itself. And when we did comparisons against the new offers from that provider and what was available on the market, there were better offers to be had. So usually I'd recommend to people, you know, just get your offer checked if you can, and you have the time to get your offer checked wherever possible, because it might not be the best offer for you. And also check as well, is the contract itself fully fixed or fixed, because there is a difference between the two. So a fully fixed contract will fix your unit rates and your standing charge, like what we normally see, but then it will also fix the non-commodity proportion of your contract. When we say non-commodity, what we mean is anything that is not directly for the energy. So that'll be things like your transportation costs, your distribution costs, things like that. They make up, I think it's just around 60% of an average utility bill. So if that cost is not fully fixed into your contract, that's when we start to see customers whose prices have increased because their contract allows the supplier to up those charges if they need to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's, do we have any more questions, Helena, or is that everyone's, or is that everything that everyone's needed?
I can remember going to a session many years ago, and it was talking about economy 7. I know that seems to be quite fashion terminology now. I'm assuming it's still available from suppliers. But one thing I learned from that session, and it was probably 8-9 years ago, that people think, yes, we'll go on economy 7 because whatever we're using in the evening, it's at a reduced rate. But what I didn't realise, that if you're on that particular contract, that your daily rate is at a higher rate. So is that something that you advise on and look into for people? Because if they're not using enough during the evening hours to get the cheaper rate, then the higher daily rate is probably out, you're probably paying more than what they're saving.
So we do look into, one of the things that we do look into is things like metering charges and how people are being charged, and is there any way in which they could be running more efficiently. One thing I have seen is that a lot of people, in my experience, believe that one size fits all, which really isn't the case. Every organization, every building is completely different from one another, so you have to kind of look at every case individually. Usually when we've looked at customers who are paying either like a dual tariff, let's say, and they've got a night and a day and they're not consuming much at night but the charges are higher, the time it would take to change that and the cost attached to that versus the gain in making the change have been quite negligible. And actually there's been other ways in which we've been able to assist customers to reduce their costs on site more effectively. But that is definitely one area that we look at. And we also look at charges that people are being charged on their invoices from the type of meter they have. So for example, you might have some customers that have what's called a half-hourly meter, where it's usually for large consumers because the meter readings are sent every half an hour to the distribution point. But some customers will move into a building and there will be doing something that is nowhere near that level of usage of what it previously was being used for, right, by the previous person in post, and they'll come in and that meter will still be there, and then they'll be paying all these charges that they don't really know what some of them mean, but they're expensive, and it's not fit for purpose. That meter simply isn't fit for purpose. But without anybody checking that or having the time to check it, these things can go unmissed. So anything like that where you're not sure and you just want someone to check over it, please feel free to contact us. That's what Zoe's department do. They look at things like that, and they're really experienced with experiences of doing it, of what works, what doesn't work, what they can and can't do, and we'll be able to advise you on what you can do to reduce any costs wherever possible.
So the moral of that story very much is to regularly review. And I think most village halls, because it's volunteers and they usually think, well, because it's happened this way for many years, we'll carry on. And I doubt whether many village halls would actually do that review unless they're fully sort of savvy of the energy market. I know I wouldn't be. So it's really good to know that Utility Aid can actually offer that service to give that sort of assistance to volunteers that are not sure what they should be looking for on their energy contracts. So that's really helpful. And another thing that charity village halls, it's their duty, it's their legal duty to act in the best interests of the charity. So actually in this, energy crisis that we're in, they can't do nothing. It's not in the best interest of the charity to do nothing. They have really got to be quite on the ball with this, and if they don't know, to ask for help, because otherwise they're just going to be left behind. And it's a worry, obviously, for all charities. and households, because nobody knows what they should be doing. I can envisage, Emily, that you will be probably a very, very busy business in the coming months and years. But I mean, it's also for the village halls themselves, it's understanding it's not just getting the best energy deal, and you've obviously touched on this. It's very much about what we call the energy hierarchy, and insulate before you generate. So it's very much looking at behaviour change.
Yeah,
as you said, touching on, you know, switching off things on standby, making sure that all their users know to shut doors and windows where they can, and heating rooms appropriately for its use. So very much on behaviour change. Then reduce losses, which is obviously the energy efficiency of the building, which again, trustees, it's their duty to make sure that the building is as insulated as it possibly can. And then thirdly, it's looking at how they can have renewable energy if it's applicable, or get on the best energy contracts. So
yeah,
yes, it's a lot for volunteers to have to manage.
it
have
is.
to deal with, and it's very, very worrying. But a point that you made earlier on, which I was not aware of, and very much about the idea of the warm hubs, which is very topical. Lots of village halls are looking to do this. So it's good that you pointed out that groups have got to check with their energy supplier that they're going to be allowed without penalty to suddenly increase their usage, what they normally have done. So that's a really, really valid thing that I'm going to take forward from this session. Lots of points, but that's something that really, really did resonate with me when we are advising groups about looking about offering a warm space within their building, that very much they've got to look at the supplier's terms and conditions. And I would also recommend they contact their insurer as well, because if it's going to be a use that it's not been used for, you know, previously, it's always best to check with the people that you've got contracts with and services with.
Always in the first point. Yeah, absolutely.
So information is something that we're not offering at RAD. We have in the past, but it's something we need to look at, is offering to village halls a service where we can do energy audits. We do not offer that at the moment. So we just tend to direct people to the NEA, National Energy Agency, and we've got a pro forma energy audit if the committee feels confident enough to do it themselves. So there are a couple of agencies where we've got pro forma energy audits. So if anybody wants to contact me, we've got those. And there's a publication which is it's quite old now. It goes back to 2006. Again, it's the NEA, and it's called Energy Efficiency in Community Buildings. The principles of that are still very much the same, even though some of the technical bit may have changed, but the principles of actually what they're saying in that publication. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I've got that. I can send that electronically. And that's a good starting point for anybody that feels that they want to tackle this themselves, rather than maybe paying quite a lot of money for somebody to come and do the energy audit for them. A lot of it can be done with people, volunteers. Any questions on that at all? No, okay. So I think we've covered everything. We will send out the ACRE publication, which is the dealing with VAT on fuel and power. That does actually explain it in quite detail about the levels where you can, you know, you're on a reduced rate or paying the higher rate, and the de minimis levels as well for different types of fuel. So I'll send that out. Is there any other information? We'll send the slides out, Emily's slides. Anything else that we've forgotten?
Oh, I think that was it.
That was it, wasn't it? Yeah. And going back to things like publications and training courses, again, I just want to remind people that we do have a membership scheme. It's been advertised, it's on our website if they wanted to revisit that. But as part of that, I think we are offering the free invoice validation for subscribers to the Village Hall membership scheme as well. So have a look at our website. And it's an annual subscription if you wanted to become members, but it's got lots of other benefits as well. But I just plug that one before we finish.
Good.
So thank you so much, Emily. It's been really, really
Yep, thank you, Emily.
No, my
Yes.
pleasure.
It's been useful this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been
No,
really
no.
useful.
Any last questions before we finish?
No, we're all good, thank you.